opening words this morning are written by Katie Romano Griffin. Come, let us enter this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us worship.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Claudia Marshall. I'm your worship associate this morning. Our chalice illumination is called To Remember, and it's by Ade Ama Kraba. Spirit of life, we have come here today to remember what some are intent on making us forget, to remember man who fought to end segregation, to remember a man who marched to counter prejudice and oppression, to remember a man who was filled with hope, with peace and hope, to remember man with promise and a dream, to remember man with a voice that rang out for justice and freedom. All these things we remember and honor in the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and a life well lived in service to all. May it be so. Good morning again. And thank you for coming this morning. I just want to kind of go over some of the rules. You know, I know you guys know them well by now. And for anybody who might be here for the first time, we're still in a transitional mode of worship due to the pandemic. And currently, we're still wearing masks and refraining from congregational singing. We have suspended our traditional fellowship of coffee and refreshments together. Instead, we're following safety guidelines and enjoying fellowship after the service with conversation. Invite folks to step outside, weather permitting. Whether for a safer environment, whether at the entrance or our back patio or a memorial garden. For now, as I understand, children's education classes are suspended, but we hope it won't be too long, many more weeks before they can join in the sanctuary for the first part of the worship before they leave for their classes. These are just some of the ways we pull together to keep each other safe, and our practices will evolve with time, God, hopefully, and CDC recommendations. Thank you again for joining us in worship, and let's begin with our time for all ages.
Good morning and welcome to the Wonder Box. Let's see what's inside our box today. We have colors and we have numbers. This reminds me of an awesome story called One by Katherine Otoshi. I love the story because it reminds me to use my voice for good. Let me share it with you. So, blue was a quiet color. He enjoyed looking up at the sky, floating on the waves, on days he felt daring, splashing in rain puddles. Every once in a while, he wished he could be more sunny like yellow, or bright like green, more regal like purple, or outgoing like orange. But overall, he liked being blue, except for when he was with Red. Red was a hothead. He liked to pick on Blue. Red is a great color, he'd say. Red is hot and blue is not. And then Blue would feel bad about being blue. Sometimes yellow comforted Blue. Blue is a very nice color, she'd say. But yellow never said that in front of Red. She never said, stop picking on Blue. Green, purple, and orange thought Blue was nice too. But they never told Red to stop either. Every time Red said something mean and no one spoke up, he got bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon Red grew so big that everyone was afraid of him. No one dared stop him. Red picked on all the colors. Then everyone felt a little blue. Until one came. He had a different shape with bold strokes and squared corners. He was funny, and he made the colors laugh. Red saw this and got very hot. Stop laughing, Yellow. And Yellow would stop. Stop laughing, he told Green. Stop laughing, he told Purple and Orange. And you know what? They all did. Red rolled up to one. Stop laughing, he told him. But one stood up straight like an arrow and said, no. Red was mad, but one wouldn't budge, so Red rolled away. One turned to the other colors and said, if someone is mean and picks on me, I, for one, stand up and say no. Then Yellow felt brave and said, me too. And Green agreed and said, me 3. Then Purple became 4. And Orange became 5. Blue saw the colors change, and he wanted to count too. Red grew hot, red hot. He felt left out. He grew hotter and hotter and hotter. Red raced over to Blue and said what he always said. Can you say it with me? Red is hot. Blue is not. But this time Blue stood up tall and became 6. Red can be really hot, he said, but Blue can be super cool. Red blew a fuse and tried to roll over Blue, but everyone took a stand and said no. Seeing them standing tall made Red feel very, very small. Then Red turned even redder and began rolling away. Blue called out, can Red be hot and Blue be cool? Red stopped in his tracks. Red can count too, said one. Red rocked and rolled and turned into 7. Everyone counts, they shouted. Then Red laughed and joined the fun. I wonder, where do you see yourself in this story? Have you ever been in a situation where you were afraid to speak out? Or maybe you were the one speaking out. Maybe you were the one. Sometimes it just takes one voice to begin a chorus that cannot be ignored. And with this, our story is told. Until the next time.
Gary will perform Precious Lord, Take My Hand, which was a favorite hymn of Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you, Gary. Each week, our church offers individuals an opportunity to give of our time and our resources. Please know that what you do is deeply appreciated. It is in the interest of safety. We are not passing the plate for the time being. However, please feel free to drop your donation in one of the 2 donation boxes as you leave the church. There are giving envelopes in the hymnals and at the donation boxes. Or you may go to the church's website and click on the donate link at the top of the page. It is enriching to the soul to be able to give. As the Bible says, give and it shall be given to you. Know that what you give rebounds in this community and throughout the earth. And thank you for giving this to this community. Marilyn's going to sing Spirit of Life for us. It's my honor to introduce our Reverend Amy. She has been such an inspiration. I can always count on her to be authentic and spiritual. She's teaching us today about the application of an African American spiritual called Wade in the Water. If you're familiar with Bible history, spiritual songs are songs that were created and sung by enslaved African Americans. The song draws on the New Testament, verse John 4, "For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then, after the first troubling of the water, stepped in was made whole of any disease that he had." The song also references the Israelites' escape out of Egypt. It is widely believed, but not proven, that Harriet Tubman used this song as a way to warn enslaved people to get into the water, to hide their scent from the dogs on their trail. I learned that during the civil rights movement, that these wades in the water were some of the most disturbing encounters. Welcome, Reverend Amy Moses Lagos.
In the summer of 1964, Cynthia Clark was 14 years old and living in St. Augustine, Florida. Cynthia is Black, and that summer she had participated in several marches and rallies for civil rights. Black leaders were planning a wade-in at the whites-only swimming beach. Wade-ins were actions where Black Americans demanded equal access by entering pools and beaches reserved for whites only. Reverend Hosea Williams, a national leader in the civil rights movement, called Cynthia's mother and asked if Cynthia could participate in the protest. Cynthia's mother agreed. Cynthia and dozens of protesters marched onto the beach. A group of white men attacked the protesters and punched them with their fists. When Cynthia returned to the car, she realized her nose had been broken. She recalls that Reverend Williams said to her, "Oh, your mama's gonna kill me. She didn't want you to go, and I begged her, and look what happened." That was Cynthia's last protest that summer. However, her courage and action changed the course of American history. I am inspired by Cynthia's courage and commitment at such a young age, and I am deeply disturbed by the hatred that would lead someone to punch and injure a 14-year-old girl. I heard Cynthia's story on an episode of the Vox podcast, Today Explained, entitled Missing Chapter. The podcast tells the story of the Whedons in St. Augustine in the 1960s. The information I am sharing with you today comes from that podcast, reported by Ranjana Chakraborty. When many people think of the civil rights movement in the United States, they think of a few key events. These include the Supreme Court decision on Brown versus the Board of Education, the Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, and Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. But the civil rights movement was a decentralized, grassroots movement. Ordinary people came together to organize and take action for justice all over the United States. The Whedons in Florida were an extremely important part of the movement. Whedons drew attention to the injustice that Black Americans did not have equal access to public beaches and swimming pools. Many cities passed laws saying Blacks could not enter public waters. Sometimes there were separate swimming areas, and these were frequently in worse conditions than the swimming areas for whites. For example, in New Orleans, the beach designated for Blacks was extremely polluted with waste from nearby fishing camps. The Whedons drew attention to the ways in which white and Black Americans had unequal access to leisure activities. They were similar to the lunch counter sit-ins in other areas of the United States. The civil rights movement in St. Augustine began in 1963, and it was initially led by a dentist and NAACP youth advisor named Robert Haling. He and others organized nonviolent protests, sit-ins, and marches. These actions were met with violence. Protesters were beaten and jailed. Opponents would shoot into their houses at night and even firebomb their houses. Cynthia Clark recalls that their family could not have any lights on at night because if they did, their house might be shot at or firebombed. She said this, "My brother and I still had to keep up our studies. When darkness came, we would take turns going into that closet and closing that door to study. We knew that if we did not go into that particular area to study, we would either be shot or the house was going to be burned down." Robert Haling reached out to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference for support. The SCLC had been founded and was led by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. At that time, Dr. King was working to get the Civil Rights Act passed by Congress. The Civil Rights Act would prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin. It would strengthen voting rights and desegregation of schools. But the bill was stuck in Congress. King hoped that acts of civil disobedience in St. Augustine would be well publicized and would help get the bill passed. Activists connected with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference from all over the country came to St. Augustine. They chose as their target the Monson Motor Lodge. They wanted Black and white participants to swim in the pool together. J.T. Johnson was 26 years old at that time and had traveled from Georgia to participate in the protests. He had learned to swim in the Flint River and had taught others to swim as well. He said he could lead the protest, but he didn't have a bathing suit. So his friend lent him his bathing suit, and JT agreed to be the leader. White participants entered the club and went to the pool. Black participants had to sneak through the hotel grounds to get to the pool. Both white and Black activists swam in the pool that was designated for whites only. And then something truly shocking happened. The owner of the hotel, James Brock, took 2 jugs of hydrochloric acid and poured them into the pool. The water bubbled from the chemical reaction, and the swimmers grabbed each other in terror. Fortunately, the acid did not actually burn the protesters, but the moment was caught on camera by a journalist. Then sheriffs entered the water, forcibly removed the swimmers, and took them to jail. JT had to go to jail still dripping with water and wearing his bathing suit. At the jail, officials would not allow him to eat because he was not dressed. So all the protesters went on a hunger strike. They were held in jail for 4 days. The photo of James Brock pouring acid into the pool is chilling and deeply disturbing. He has a look of casual indifference on his face. The swimmers clutch each other in terror. It is a powerful image of the brutality of the racism of whites opposed to integration. The photo went viral at a time before Twitter and Facebook. It was published in newspapers all across the country and shown on TV newscasts. It helped sway public opinion in favor of supporting the Civil Rights Act. On June 19th, 1964, the Senate passed the bill. JT heard the news while still in jail. This immediately lifted the spirits of the activists. They started singing together, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around." But the House still hadn't passed the bill. The activists continued the wait-ins, this time on the beach. And this brings us to the story I told at the beginning, where Cynthia participated in the wait-in at the beach. These actions kept the pressure on Congress. On July 2nd, 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law. The act ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It was a huge success of the civil rights movement that transformed the United States for the better. The activists who participated in the wait-ins felt rightfully proud of their actions. Reporter Ranjana Chakraborty asked Cynthia, "Looking back, did you think to yourself at all that you played a small part in getting that bill signed?" Cynthia replied, "Absolutely, absolutely. I felt good about what I had done. I felt good about what my family had done, because I know we made a difference." The Monson Motor Lodge was torn down and a Hilton was built in its place. JT Johnson goes through the front door now when he stays at the Hilton. But for all the accomplishments of the civil rights movement, the struggle for liberation for Black Americans did not end. It continues to this day. After the Civil Rights Act passed, there was a backlash. White folks moved to the suburbs and swam at private resorts. Many cities chose to close down public swimming pools because they did not want to integrate them. The unequal access to water and recreation activities for Black Americans continues to impact Black communities today. According to a USA Today newspaper article entitled "Unwelcome Waters, Segregated Public Pools and the Lasting Effect They Have on the Black Community," 64% of Black Americans have little to no swimming ability. In contrast, 40% of whites have little to no swimming ability. When an adult doesn't know how to swim, the children in the household have only a 19% chance of learning how to swim themselves. Black children ages 5 to 19 drowned at a rate 5.5 times higher than their white counterparts between 1990 and 2010, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Cynthia Clark still does not feel welcome in her hometown of St. Augustine. She says, "I visit St. Augustine now, and I still have an eerie feeling because that element is still there of people who don't want Black people there." There is still so much work to be done in the struggle for racial justice and equity. During the civil rights movement, people of all races marched, organized, protested, and struggled for freedom for all people. The movement did not end, but continued and evolved over time. It continues to the present day. It is our responsibility to learn about past injustices and understand how these injustices continue to impact our society today. And we can be a part of the movement for racial justice in the United States. There are so many ways to help bend the arc of the universe towards justice. BBUUC will participate in the 41st annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day Parade, happening tomorrow at 10 a.m. in downtown Jacksonville. The event celebrates Dr. King's life and message of equality, opportunity, and service to others. BBUUC members and friends are active in the Interfaith Coalition for Action, Reconciliation, and Empowerment. iCare is a faith-based organization working for social justice in Jacksonville. Members are working on 4 issues this year: civil citations, crisis intervention training, crime prevention, and climate change. This year, BBUUC will, once again, participate in the Nehemiah Assembly on March 28th. A final way you can be a part of the movement for racial justice is by learning more about the 8th principle of Unitarian Universalism. The proposed 8th principle states, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." The 8th principle was initiated by people of color within Unitarian Universalism because the first 7 principles adopted in the 1980s do not explicitly address anti-racism or other oppressions. As Unitarian Universalist leader Paula Cole-Jones said, "After working with congregations on these issues for over 15 years, I realized that a person can believe they are being a good UU and following the 7 principles without thinking about or dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. When we are trying to change culturally entrenched attitudes and generations of habit and history, making our commitments direct and explicit is enormously helpful. The 8th principle asks us to act, to go beyond beliefs, to practice and action. It asks us to hold ourselves accountable and to fulfill the potential of our existing principles." At this time, 145 congregations have adopted the principle. Paula Cole-Jones gave a sermon about the 8th principle and also answered questions at our fellowship hour on May 23rd, 2021. You can find the video of the sermon and the recording in the it's the video of the sermon and the recording of the fellowship hour in the BBUC membership drive. If you want to watch the videos and you have any trouble finding them, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. You can also learn more at 8thprincipleuu.org. Today, we call to mind painful and violent events from the past, parts of history that break our hearts. May these stories break our hearts wide open so that we are more deeply committed to bringing about justice, equity, and the transformation of our world. We recalled the courage and commitment of ordinary people who came together to accomplish extraordinary things. These stories give us hope for the possibility of creating real and lasting change for racial justice in our communities. May the courage of civil rights activists inspire us in our efforts to side with love in our community. May learning our history help us to build the beloved community in our present. May it be so. Amen.
Okay. Marilyn, I guess, no, we already did that. Okay, sorry. Okay. Benediction is prayer for Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday. It's by Kathleen Roslin. Spirit of justice, God who befriends those who stand upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, we are grateful to be together this morning. We gather especially to remember Dr. Martin Luther King, but not only him, for there were thousands of unnamed women and men who put their bodies and lives on the line so that all may be free. And yet freedom comes at a cost. And we know that racism and homophobia, ageism and ableism, sexism and classism, all of these often acknowledged realities prevent us from fully knowing one another, from creating the beloved community, spoken of by prophets and ordinary persons alike. May the work of Dr. King continue to eradicate injustice wherever and whenever we encounter it. May we continue to speak out against injustice, to speak even if we are afraid of our words. May the spirit of Dr. King continue to flow through our daily living. May we have the courage of Dr. King as we continue to stand up for justice, reconciliation, and truth, despite challenge and controversy. Dr. King went to the mountaintop, he saw the promised land, and he reassured us we would get there one day. May that be no paradisial dream, but a reality in our own time. May it be so. Amen.